Now, here's a point in our lesson where it will be helpful for us to draw a contrast between Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and the Pharisees. The scribes and the Pharisees together basically looked upon in that day as the religious teachers and the religious leaders. Go with me to Matthew chapter 23, and let's notice two verses regarding the scribes and the Pharisees. First of all, in Matthew 23 and verse 4, Jesus said of these people, "For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers." And so here we learn of these so-called religious teachers and leaders that they were bad about binding heavy spiritual and moral burdens on their students, on their hearers, and yet they themselves, they would not lift a finger to help out those individuals with their own burdens. Or maybe the idea could be that they will not even apply all of those things to themselves. That's a possibility as well. And so that's certainly not an effective teacher. It's definitely not a compassionate shepherd, as we see there in Matthew 23:4. Now, move down with me in Matthew 23 to verse 13. "But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye or allow others that are entering to go in." Now, in this context of Matthew 9, that statement we just read in Matthew 23:13 makes a lot of sense. Because earlier in Matthew 9, you can read about how the Pharisees were opposing Jesus and even slandering Jesus, as you can read there in Matthew 9, verses 32 through 34. And so picture this multitude of people who are drawn to Jesus. They're interested in Jesus. They're learning from Jesus. And yet the Pharisees are doing what they can to undermine his efforts, to slanderously misrepresent him, and to do all they can to keep people from following Jesus. Well, that's Matthew 23:13. The Pharisees themselves, they were refusing the kingdom of heaven. They weren't wanting to go into the kingdom, and they were even not allowing others who were striving to enter. They were doing all they could to impede or hinder them. What pitiable shepherds, how terrible those Pharisees and scribes treated the people who were looking to them for instruction. And yet they were not getting what they needed. And that's why Jesus looked upon the multitudes with compassion, and he described them as sheep having no shepherd. Now, with this stark contrast, you're ready for Matthew 11. Look at Matthew 11 and verse 28, and now we can better appreciate why Jesus said what he said. Matthew 11:28, Jesus stood and he told the masses, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." The compassion of Jesus that we read about in Matthew 9 and verse 36, that compassion is coming out in his own very words here in Matthew 11:28 through 30. And that love, that compassion, that interest in people stands in contrast with the abusive and oppressive ways of the scribes and Pharisees. So when we look through the eyes of Jesus, we see people, and hopefully we are moved at their plight. We are moved with compassion, and we're not only seeing as Jesus saw now, but we're looking as Jesus looked upon them, and that should be the goal.